The moment Jennifer Matthews's fingers wrapped around that gold chain, she sealed her fate. What she thought was just another elderly black woman to intimidate became her career's death sentence. The necklace, a dead mother's final gift, tore from 72-year-old Thelma Harris's throat with a sound that would haunt Jennifer forever. The children's screams pierced the cabin. Passengers gasped, but Jennifer smiled, drunk on her power, completely unaware that she had just assaulted a retired federal judge whose grandson was filming everything. Thelma rose slowly, her voice deadly calm. "Ma'am, you have made a catastrophic error." Jennifer had no idea that in 60 seconds her victim would destroy her life with two simple words. The children screamed. The cabin froze, and Delta flight attendant Jennifer Matthews stood in the middle of a full airplane holding a dead woman's necklace in her fist, looking at Thelma Harris like she had just solved a problem. She had not solved a problem. She had just made the worst mistake of her life. And Thelma Harris was already standing up. What happened on that flight from Atlanta to New York will make your blood boil. And before we go any further, if you are new here, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment right now telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. The morning started the way most good mornings do for Thelma Harris, with the smell of her granddaughter's shampoo, and the sound of two small voices arguing over who got the window seat. "Grandma, tell her I called it first," said Marcus, who was 9 years old and had been talking about this airplane ride for 3 solid weeks. "Grandma," he did not, said Destiny, who was 11, and had inherited her grandmother's talent for standing her ground without raising her voice. "I sat by the window on the way to Atlanta. He gets it on the way home." That was the deal. Thelma Harris smiled. She had heard this particular argument, or some version of it, in cars, at dinner tables, and now, apparently, on airplanes. She reached over and gently patted Destiny's hand, then looked at Marcus with the kind of calm authority that grandmothers build up over decades. "Baby," she said to Marcus, "your sister is right. A deal is a deal." Marcus opened his mouth, thought better of it, and slid into the middle seat without another word. That was Thelma. Patient, measured, the kind of woman who had raised 3 children, buried a husband, and cared for her own mother through the last 5 years of her life, and had done all of it with a grace that younger people spent lifetimes trying to learn. She was not a woman who made scenes. She was not a woman who complained. She was the kind of woman who got through things, and got through them quietly, and then went home and prayed and started the next day fresh. But today, she was wearing her mother's necklace. It was not a flashy piece. It was a gold chain, simple, with a small pendant, a tiny cross with a single chip of diamond, no bigger than a freckle. Her mother, Dorothy Harris, had worn it every single day of her adult life. She had worn it to church, and to work, and to the hospital on the day Thelma was born. She had worn it in every photograph Thelma had ever seen of her. And when Dorothy passed 4 months ago, the necklace had come to Thelma, and Thelma had worn it every day since. She also had on her own wedding band, which she still wore 20 years after her husband Robert had gone. And Destiny was wearing a small gold bracelet that had been her late mother's, Thelma's daughter-in-law gone too soon 6 years back. And Marcus had on a little chain with a cross that matched Thelma's, a gift from Dorothy herself on the boy's Fth birthday. They were a family dressed in their history. Their jewelry was not decoration. It was memory. It was love. It was the physical proof that the people they had lost were still with them, still close, still part of every ordinary Tuesday and every airplane ride home. None of that, of course, meant anything to Jennifer Matthews. Jennifer Matthews was 34 years old and had been a flight attendant for Delta for 6 years. She was tall, blonde, with a voice that carried easily over engine noise, and a manner that some of her colleagues described as efficient, and others described as something considerably less flattering. She had been assigned to the Atlanta to New York flight that morning, and she had walked down the aisle doing her pre-departure check with the kind of focused energy that made passengers unconsciously tuck in their elbows as she passed. She stopped at row 14. She looked at Thelma Harris. She looked at the children. She looked at the jewelry. And something shifted behind her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, her voice professionally pleasant, in a way that had just a little too much edge underneath it. "I'm going to need you to remove your jewelry before takeoff." Thelma looked up. She had been helping Marcus buckle his seatbelt. She thought for a moment she had misheard. "I'm sorry." "The jewelry," Jennifer said, gesturing vaguely at Thelma's necklace, her ring, the children's pieces. "You'll need to take it off. Store it in your carry-on for the duration of the flight." Thelma stared at her. "What regulation is that?" "It's a safety concern, ma'am." "A safety concern," Thelma repeated very slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Metal jewelry can be a hazard in the event of an emergency." Now, Thelma Harris had flown dozens of times in her life. She had flown to visit her sister in Houston and her grandchildren in Atlanta and her college roommate in Seattle. She had flown when the rules about liquids changed and when they made you take off your shoes and when they started charging for checked bags. She had read the safety cards. She had listened to every pre-flight announcement ever made within her hearing. And in all of those years and all of those flights, she had never once heard anything about removing jewelry before takeoff. She kept her voice even. "I have never heard of that rule." "It's policy, ma'am. Can you show it to me in writing?" Jennifer Matthews blinked just once. A tiny flicker of something, irritation maybe, or recalibration, moved across her face. "I don't carry the policy manual with me, ma'am, but I am authorized to enforce it," authorized Thelma said. She felt something settle low in her chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something she recognized from a long life of being a black woman in America. The thing you feel when you know exactly what is happening, but you are not yet sure how far it is going to go. Grandma Destiny said quietly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby," Thelma said. "Nothing's wrong." She looked back up at Jennifer Matthews. "This necklace belonged to my mother. She passed away 4 months ago. This bracelet belonged to my grandson's mother, who passed 6 years ago. These are family heirlooms. They are not coming off." Jennifer's professional pleasantness developed a harder edge. "Ma'am, I understand that. But no," Thelma said simply, "I don't think you do." There was a pause, the kind of pause that has weight in it. Across the aisle, a man in his 50s who had been reading a magazine looked up over the top of his glasses. Behind them, a young woman in a window seat stopped scrolling her phone. "Ma'am," Jennifer said, and now the pleasantness was almost entirely gone, replaced by something that sounded more like a warning. "I need you to comply, or I will have to speak to the captain." "Then speak to the captain," Thelma said. Her hands were perfectly still in her lap. Jennifer Matthews turned and walked back toward the front of the plane with the kind of stride that means someone is controlling themselves carefully. Marcus looked at his grandmother. "Grandma, are we going to get in trouble?" Thelma put her arm around him. "No, sweetheart. We are not going to get in trouble. We haven't done anything wrong." Then why is she mad? Thelma thought about how to answer that. She thought about all the ways she could explain it, the easy explanations and the harder ones, the ones that were age-appropriate and the ones that were simply true. She had answered versions of this question before for her own children, in different decades, in different contexts, with different details, but always essentially the same shape of question underneath. Why is she mad? Why are they looking at us like that? Why do we have to do something everyone else doesn't have to do? "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people make rules for some people that they don't make for other people. And when that happens, the right thing to do is to stand still and be calm and tell the truth." Destiny, who was 11 and understood more than Marcus did, looked at her grandmother with serious eyes. "Is this because we're black?" Thelma held her granddaughter's gaze. She didn't look away, and she didn't soften it. "It might be, baby. I don't know yet, but I know that we have done nothing wrong." 3 rows forward, a white woman in her 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, had heard everything. Her name was Carol Simmons, and she was a retired schoolteacher from Savannah, Georgia, and she had her own quiet opinion about what she was witnessing. She looked at the woman next to her, a younger woman, maybe 40, business clothes headphones around her neck, and raised her eyebrows. The younger woman shook her head almost imperceptibly and looked back at her laptop. Jennifer Matthews returned 4 minutes later, and she did not come back alone. She had brought with her the lead flight attendant, a man named David Park, who had the look of someone who had been interrupted in the middle of something and was not sure yet how serious this was going to be. "Mrs. Harris," he said, consulting what appeared to be a seating manifest. "I'm David, the lead cabin crew member for this flight. Jennifer has informed me that you're declining to follow a safety directive. Jennifer has informed you incorrectly," Thelma said. Her voice was so calm it was almost musical. "Jennifer asked me to remove jewelry that has no legitimate connection to any safety policy I have ever heard of targeting me and my grandchildren specifically. I asked her to show me the policy in writing. She was unable to do that. I declined to comply with an unexplained, unverifiable demand, and I intend to continue declining." David blinked. He had been expecting a frightened older woman, or an I-8 one. He had not been expecting this. This precise, articulate, utterly composed person who had apparently been paying closer attention than most passengers ever did. "Ma'am, our crew members are empowered to make judgment calls regarding passenger safety." "Under what authority?" Thelma asked. "Quoted from what specific FAA regulation?" "What part of the CFR covers jewelry removal?" Silence. "Because I am familiar," Thelma continued, "with the fact that the FAA requires rings and metal accessories to be removed for medical procedures. I am familiar with the fact that metal detectors at security exist for a different purpose entirely. I am not familiar with any airborne jewelry prohibition. Are you?" David opened his mouth, closed it again. "Is there a problem back here?" The voice came from behind them, from a man, 2 rows back, who had gotten involved despite himself. He was big, broad-shouldered, maybe 60, and he sounded like someone who spent his professional life asking questions that demanded answers. "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm watching a flight attendant harass an elderly woman about her necklace, and I'd genuinely like to understand what the actual policy violation is." Jennifer turned. "Sir, this is a private conversation. You're having it in the middle of a full airplane," the man said. "That's not private. That's public. What is the regulation you're citing?" Another passenger, a woman in her late 40s, spoke up 2 rows on the other side. "I heard the whole thing. She asked to see it in writing and you said you didn't have it." "That's correct," said Carol Simmons, from 3 rows forward without turning around. Her voice was precise and dry as a school attendance report. "I heard that too." Jennifer Matthews' jaw tightened. "I need everyone to mind their own business," she said, and the professional pleasantness was fully gone, now replaced by something raw and defensive and a little bit frightened. "This is a crew matter. A crew matter that requires an elderly grandmother to take off her dead mother's necklace," the big man said. "Got it. Makes perfect sense, sir. If you continue to interfere with cabin crew operations, I will have you removed from Jennifer." David Park's voice came in sharp and low. "That's enough." Jennifer looked at him. Her face was flushed now. David turned to Thelma Harris with the measured expression of a man doing rapid damage control. "Mrs. Harris, I apologize for the confusion. We're going to clarify this situation, and in the meantime, please make yourself comfortable." He took Jennifer by the arm and steered her forward with a kind of firm gentleness that left no room for argument. The cabin breathed out. Thelma sat for a moment with her hands in her lap, very still. Destiny reached over and took her grandmother's hand. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay?" Thelma turned to look at her 11 years old, her son's child. The spitting image at this age of the girl's late mother wearing that small gold bracelet that still 4 months later sometimes made Thelma's throat tighten when the light hit it just right. "Yes, baby," she said, "I'm okay." But she wasn't done. She reached into her purse. She pulled out her phone. Her daughter Angela was back in New York. Angela, who was 48 and had a law degree and the sharpest mind of any of Thelma's 3 children, and who called her mother every single morning at 7 a.m., without exception, and who had a way of getting to the center of a problem so fast that it made lawyers in her firm uncomfortable. Thelma found Angela's number. She pressed call. It rang twice. "Mom, why are you calling? Aren't you on the plane?" "Is everything Angela?" Thelma said, keeping her voice quiet and level. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. The moment Angela heard that particular tone, the one that was calm on the surface and vibrating underneath the one her mother only used when something was genuinely wrong, she stopped moving. Wherever she was, whatever she was doing, she stopped. "Mom, talk to me." "What happened?" "A flight attendant just ordered me to remove your grandmother's necklace and the children's jewelry. She cited a safety rule she cannot show me in writing. She came back with the lead attendant. Several passengers have already spoken up. They are now conferring at the front of the plane." A beat of silence. "Mom," Angela said, "are you recording this?" "I am not yet." "Start recording right now. Don't stop until the plane lands. What is the airline Delta? Flight number?" Thelma looked at the ticket still in her hand. She gave Angela the number. "Names. Do you have names, Jennifer Matthews?" "The lead is David Park." There was a sound on Angela's end. The specific sound of a person sitting down, very deliberately, and pulling up a laptop. "Mom, I want you to stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Do not let them intimidate you. You have done absolutely nothing wrong, and you're about to have the full weight of everything I know how to do standing right behind you. Angela and Mom." Angela's voice for just a half second dropped out of lawyer mode, dropped into daughter mode. The voice of a woman who still every morning at 7 a.m. heard her grandmother's voice in her own head when she woke up. "The necklace stays on." Thelma closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "Yes," she said, "it does." She hung up and turned on her recording app. She set the phone on her tray table, face up, quiet, doing its job. Then Jennifer Matthews came back down the aisle, and this time the professional pleasantness was entirely gone. "Mrs. Harris," she said, and her voice had taken on a tone that Selma recognized immediately. The tone of someone who had talked to someone and come back feeling more powerful than before, whether that power was real or imagined. "I've spoken with the captain. He has authorized me to inform you that your continued refusal to comply with crew directives is a violation of federal aviation regulations, and if you do not remove the jewelry immediately, we will be returning to the gate." Every head in their section turned. "Returning to the gate," the big man said, and his voice had gotten very quiet, in a way that was more alarming than loudness. "Over a necklace. Sir, because there are 80 people on this flight," he continued, "and I'd genuinely like to hear you explain to all of them why we're going back to the gate. The captain's authority on board this aircraft is not the same as federal aviation regulations," said Carol Simmons calmly, from 3 rows forward, still not turning around. "Those are 2 different things, dear. The captain has discretionary authority over the aircraft. That authority exists within FAA guidelines, not above them." Jennifer stared at the back of Carol's silver head. "Are you a lawyer?" Jennifer demanded. "No," Carol said. "I was a high school civics teacher for 31 years. She turned her head slightly, but I paid attention. A sound moved through the cabin. Not exactly a laugh. Something closer to a collective exhale that had a laugh hiding inside it. Jennifer Matthews' face went red. She turned back to Thelma Harris. And here was where something changed. Here was where whatever restraint or calculation had been guiding her behavior finally gave way to something more reflexive and more revealing. She leaned in close and dropped her voice to something meant to be intimidating. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, "but on this plane, I am the authority, and you will do what I tell you." The cabin went absolutely silent. Thelma Harris looked at this woman. She looked at her for a long moment. The way you look at something you want to see, clearly want to see all the way through before you respond to it. She was 72 years old. She had grown up in Birmingham, Alabama, in the 1950s. She had been told to sit in the back. She had been told to use a different door. She had been told in 100 different ways, and with 100 different words, that she was less than that, she was other, that the rules were different for her, and would always be different for her. And she had outlasted every single person who had ever told her so. She was not afraid of Jennifer Matthews. "My phone," Thelma said, her voice perfectly, almost preternaturally calm, "has been recording since you began this interaction. Every word you have said, every word these passengers have said, every word I have said." She glanced at the phone on the tray table, including what you just said to me. Jennifer Matthews looked at the phone. And my daughter Thelma continued, who is an attorney, is currently on the phone with Delta Airlines corporate customer service line. She has our flight number, your full name, the lead attendant's full name, and a list of witnesses who have already vocally objected to your conduct. She paused. Would you like to continue telling me who has authority on this plane? The silence in the cabin was so complete that someone 3 rows back could be heard putting down a cup. Jennifer Matthews stood very still, and then, from somewhere behind her, someone started to clap. A single person, slow, steady. Then a second. Then the big man 2 rows back joined in, and Carol Simmons, and the woman with the headphones who hadn't said a word until now, and a young couple across the aisle. And before 30 seconds had passed, the entire section of the plane was applauding. Not wildly, not performatively, but with the genuine, deliberate energy of people who had watched something and had an opinion about it. Jennifer Matthews turned and walked away from them. Marcus looked at his grandmother with an expression somewhere between a ruck and deeply confused. "Grandma," he said slowly, "did you just win?" Thelma picked up her phone and looked at the recording. Still running. She set it back down. "We're not finished yet, baby," she said. But she was smiling. And the necklace, her mother's necklace, that tiny cross with its chip of a diamond hanging right where it always hung, caught the cabin light and threw it back small and gold and perfectly stubbornly, beautifully intact. The applause died down. The cabin settled, and for about 4 minutes, everything was almost quiet. Almost. Thelma kept her hand near her phone. She wasn't looking at the front of the plane, but she was aware of it, the way you're aware of a door that isn't fully closed. That low, constant attention in the back of your mind that never quite lets you relax. Destiny had her head against the window. Marcus had finally gotten interested in his tablet, and Thelma sat with her hands in her lap and her mother's necklace against her chest, and she breathed the way her own mother had taught her to breathe when something was trying to get under her skin. Slow, steady from the bottom. Her phone buzzed. "Angela," she picked it up immediately. "Mom, I'm on hold with Delta Corporate. I've been on hold 11 minutes. I have the flight number. I have both names. I have the time of the incident logged. Are you still okay?" "Still okay," Velma said quietly. "Is the recording still running?" "Yes." "Good. Don't stop it. Not for any reason." A pause. "How are the kids?" Thelma looked at Destiny, who was pretending to look out the window, but was very clearly listening to every word. "They're fine. They're being brave. They got that from somewhere." Angela's voice carried something in it. Not quite sentiment, not quite humor, but the particular warmth that lives in between those two things. Then it shifted back to business. "Mom, I also called Uncle Raymond." Thelma went still. "Angela, I know what you're going to say. Or Raymond will. Raymond is a Delta Sky Miles member with over 400,000 miles and a direct line to their executive customer relations office, and he will absolutely use both of those things right now." "Yes, a beat. I already texted him. He's already calling." Thelma pressed her lips together. Her brother Raymond was 70 years old and had the energy of a man 30 years younger when he felt an injustice had been committed against his family. She loved him completely, and he gave her a headache. "Tell him not to threaten anyone," she said. "I told him to be firm and professional." "Angela, I told him 3 times. Thelma exhaled. "All right, Mom. Listen, if that woman comes back, and I think she's going to come back, I need you to let her talk first. Don't interrupt. Let her say exactly what she's going to say. Let the recording get every word, and then respond. Don't let her make you the one who escalated. You understand, Angela? I have been navigating this my entire life." A beat. "I know, Mom. I know you have." Quiet. "Then I'll call you back the second I get through." Thelma put the phone down. She looked forward. David Park was at the front of the cabin phone to his earback, turned speaking in the clipped, careful way of someone who is being evaluated on how they handle this. Jennifer Matthews was beside him, arms crossed, weight shifted onto one hip. She was not looking back down the aisle. And then she was. Her eyes found Thelma's, held them for 2 full seconds. Then she uncrossed her arms and started walking. The big man 2 rows back, his name was Gerald. Though Thelma didn't know that yet, sat up straighter. Carol Simmons turned her head just slightly. The woman with the headphones lowered them entirely off her ears. Jennifer stopped at row 14, and this time she did not start with ma'am. She started with silence, the deliberate pressurized kind that is meant to make the other person feel the need to fill it. Thelma did not fill it. The captain, Jennifer said finally, has made a decision. What decision? Thelma asked. You will be removed from this aircraft. The cabin did not just react. It convulsed. Every person within earshot made some kind of sound or movement. Gerald said, "You've got to be kidding me," loudly enough that 3 rows heard it. A man across the aisle who hadn't said a word until this moment said flatly, "For a necklace." And behind Thelma, a young woman's voice said, "I'm recording this too." And when Thelma glanced back, she saw a phone-up camera facing forward. Marcus grabbed his grandmother's arm with both hands. Destiny didn't say anything. She just looked at Jennifer Matthews with 11-year-old eyes that were far too old for 11. And the expression on her face was not fear. It was recognition. The specific, heartbreaking recognition of a child who has just understood something about the world that she cannot unknow. Thelma looked at her granddaughter for exactly 1 second. Then she looked back at Jennifer. "On what grounds," she said, "is the captain removing me?" "Non-compliance with crew directives." "I have complied with every legitimate directive issued on this aircraft. I fastened my seatbelt. I turned off my Bluetooth device. I stowed my carry-on. I have not raised my voice. I have not made threats. I have not touched anyone." She paused. "Can you say the same?" Jennifer's eyes went to the phone on the tray table. "You need to put that away. Passengers are permitted to record interactions with airline staff in the cabin under federal guidelines. Would you like me to cite the specific provision?" "Mrs. Harris, would you like me to cite it?" Gerald from 2 rows back said. "I've got it pulled up right here if anyone needs it." Jennifer spun around. "Sir, I am warning you for the last time. Warning me of what Gerald said. And he wasn't angry exactly. He was something steadier than angry. Something that had been building for the last 15 minutes and had calcified into something immovable. Warning me that you'll remove me too. Go ahead, remove me. And the woman in 12B who's recording, and the teacher in 11C who knows her civics. Remove the whole plane. Let's see how that conversation goes for Delta." At 6 o'clock tonight, Jennifer turned back to Thelma. And this was the moment. This was the specific, identifiable moment where the situation crossed a line it could not uncross, because Jennifer Matthews reached out her hand. She didn't ask. She didn't warn. She reached out and grabbed the chain of Dorothy Harris's necklace with her fingers, and she pulled. The gold caught. The clasp held for 1 searing second against the back of Thelma's neck, and then it didn't. The chain broke free with a sound so small you could barely hear it over the engine noise, and yet somehow everyone in a 10-row radius heard it. Destiny screamed. Marcus pressed himself against his grandmother's side and grabbed her arm with both hands and made a sound that was not quite a word, just a raw, terrified noise. And Jennifer Matthews stood there with Dorothy Harris's necklace hanging from her closed fist. The cross pendant swung once, twice. Thelma Harris looked at it. She looked at it the way you look at something that you cannot immediately process. The way your mind tries to route the information, and the route keeps coming back wrong, because the information doesn't fit inside any category you have for the world. Her mother's necklace in this woman's hand. The necklace her mother had worn on the day Thelma was born. The necklace that had been around Dorothy Harris's neck in the hospital bed on the last morning of her life, and that Thelma had unclasped herself carefully with shaking hands before they took her mother away. For 3 seconds, Thelma Harris did not move. Then she stood up. She was not a large woman. She was 72 years old and 5 feet 4, and she had arthritis in both knees that her doctor had been asking her to do something about for 3 years. But she stood up the way mountains form slowly, with an authority that has nothing to do with speed or size, with a weight that comes from somewhere beneath the surface. And when she was fully standing, she looked Jennifer Matthews directly in the face from 12 inches away. And the entirety of what was in her eyes in that moment made two passengers in adjacent rows physically lean away from the interaction. "Give me my mother's necklace," she said. Her voice was so quiet, so absolutely level, that it was more frightening than any volume could have been. Jennifer took a half step back. The movement was instinctive. She caught herself and tried to recover, squaring her shoulders, but the half step had already happened, and everyone had seen it. "This jewelry give me my mother's necklace," Thelma said again. Exactly the same. Same volume, same tone, same absolute stillness. Gerald was already out of his seat, not moving toward Jennifer, just standing fully present, occupying the space behind Thelma with the unmistakable posture of someone who is there. The woman with the phone had come down the aisle and was filming from 6 feet away. Carol Simmons had unbuckled her seatbelt and turned fully around in her seat. David Park appeared from the front of the cabin at a jog. "Jennifer." His voice was tight, urgent. "Jennifer put it. She needs to comply." "Jennifer." He was beside her now, and his voice had dropped to something low and intense. "Give her the necklace back right now." A beat. One terrible suspended beat, where Jennifer Matthews stood in the center of everything she had created, holding a dead woman's necklace, surrounded by witnesses, with a recording running on the tray table, and her colleague's hand on her arm, and 70 or 80 people watching. She held it out. Thelma took it. She held it in her palm, the broken chain, the tiny cross, that chip of diamond, and she closed her fingers around it. And for just one moment, one single moment that she did not let anyone see her face, changed. The composure flickered. Not fear, not anger, something older and deeper and more private than either of those. Grief, maybe the grief of a thing you were protecting being touched by something it should never have had to touch. Then it was gone. Her face reset. She looked at David Park. "I want the captain," she said. "In this cabin now." David Park nodded. He was already pulling out his own phone. "Yes, ma'am. And I want this recorded in the official incident log, as of..." She glanced at Marcus's watch on his wrist, because her own had been on the same arm as the necklace clasp, and she didn't want to look at her wrist right now. 8:47 a.m. "Yes, ma'am. And I want Jennifer Matthews away from me and my grandchildren for the remainder of this flight." David looked at Jennifer. Jennifer looked at the floor. She walked to the back of the cabin. As soon as she turned away, Marcus wrapped both arms around his grandmother's waist from the side and pressed his face into her arm and didn't say anything. Thelma put her hand on the back of his head. She sat down slowly, carefully, the broken necklace still in her closed hand. Destiny reached over and opened her grandmother's fingers, gently looked at the broken clasp, and looked up at Thelma's face. "Can it be fixed?" "Yes, baby," Thelma said. "It can be fixed." "But she broke it." "I know she did." Destiny looked toward the back of the plane where Jennifer had gone with those serious eyes. "Grandma," she said carefully, "what's going to happen to her?" Thelma looked at her granddaughter for a moment. "Something that should have happened a long time ago," she said. Her phone was ringing. "Angela?" She picked up before the second ring. "Mom." "Mom, what just happened?" "I've been trying to call for the last 4 minutes." "Angela?" Thelma's voice was steady. "She took the necklace off me." The silence on Angela's end lasted exactly 1.5 seconds. Then she, what? "She reached over and took it off my neck. The chain is broken." Another silence shorter. "Mom, are you physically hurt?" "No." "The kid's frightened, but fine." "Is it on the recording?" Thelma looked at her phone, still running on the tray table. Every second of it. What came next from Angela was not loud. It was very quiet. In fact, the kind of quiet that is considerably more alarming than loudness. "Mom," she said, "I need you to stay on this plane. I need you to speak to the captain when he comes. I need you to get every name, every badge number, every statement offered to you. And I need you to understand that what that woman just did is not an airline policy violation. What she just did is criminal. A breath. I'm no longer calling customer service. I'm calling our attorney. Thelma said nothing. Mom, call him, Thelma said. She set the phone down. Around her, the cabin had not returned to normal. It would not return to normal. The people in the rows around her had the specific activated energy of witnesses, of people who have seen something, and know they have seen something, and are in the process of deciding what to do with that. The young woman who had filmed the interaction had gone back to her seat, but her phone was still in her hand. Gerald was in his seat, but turned sideways watching the front of the cabin. Carol Simmons had not turned back around. She was looking directly at Thelma, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and an expression that was entirely quiet and entirely unambiguous. I want you to know, Carol said from 3 rows forward across the aisle, that I saw everything, and I will say exactly what I saw to anyone who asks. Thank you, Thelma said. My name is Carol Simmons. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I am not hard to find. The man across the aisle from Carol, early 40s, suit jacket, had not said a word all morning. Looked up from his phone. Same, he said. I've got it all on video. The whole thing from when she grabbed it. He paused. My name is Derek Hall. I'm a journalist. I was on vacation. He looked at his phone. I'm not anymore. Gerald snorted once, a short, grim sound. Thelma looked at Dirk Hall. She looked at Carol Simmons. She looked at Gerald, who caught her eye, and gave a single nod that meant several things at once. I'm here. I saw it. You're not alone in this. She looked at the young woman with the phone, who nodded too. She looked at the man who had said for a necklace 20 minutes ago, who had gone back to his newspaper, but had folded it in half and set it in his lap, and was not reading it. She had spent her whole life being told that she was on her own, that the people around her would stay quiet, look away, decide it wasn't their business. She had spent her whole life being surprised by the ones who didn't. She looked down at the necklace in her hand. She was going to get this fixed. She was going to take it to the same jeweler in Harlem who had repaired Robert's wedding band for her 20 years ago. Old Mr. Pearson's, who was probably retired by now, but whose son had taken over the shop and had his father's hands. She was going to get it repaired, and she was going to put it back on. And she was going to wear it for the rest of her life. And Jennifer Matthews was not going to be any part of that story, except the thing that happened that one time that only made the wearing of it matter more. But first, the cockpit door at the front of the cabin opened, and the captain stepped out. He was younger than Thelma had expected, maybe 50. Salt and pepper hair, the precise and economical movements of someone trained to stay calm in situations that are not calm. His name tag read Captain Michael Torres. He spoke briefly to David Park, who spoke even more briefly back, and something passed across the captain's face. A small, involuntary tightening around the eyes that people who are not trained to read faces would miss entirely. Thelma Harris was very trained to read faces. She watched Captain Torres walk down the aisle toward her, and she saw in his face in those first steps that he already knew. Someone had already told him, or he had heard it himself, or he had been on with someone who had made very clear what the shape of this situation was. He knew. He stopped at row 14. He looked at Thelma. He looked at the children. He looked at her closed hand. Mrs. Harris, he said. His voice was measured and direct. My name is Captain Michael Torres. I understand that an incident occurred in the cabin. An incident, Thelma said. He heard it. The weight in those 2 words. Ma'am, I want to hear directly from you what happened. Thelma opened her hand. In her palm lay the broken necklace, the chain split, where the clasp had been torn. Captain Torres looked at it. His jaw moved once. Your flight attendant, Thelma said, reached over and removed this from around my neck by force after I declined to give it to her voluntarily. The interaction was recorded in full. I have an attorney on the line. I have at least 4 witnesses in this cabin who have identified themselves by name, and I have 2 grandchildren who watched every second of it. She paused. I would like to know what you intend to do about it. Captain Torres was quiet for 4 seconds. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I want to begin by offering my personal apology." "I appreciate that," Thelma said, "but I didn't ask for an apology. I asked what you intend to do." Something in his expression shifted. Not irritation, something closer to respect, the kind that gets made in a person without their permission, in response to someone who is exactly who they are, without any performance of it. "We will be returning to the gate," he said. Gerald, from 2 rows back, exhaled. "Not to remove me," Thelma said. It was not a question. "No, ma'am, not to remove you." The cabin understood before he said it. People shifted, looked at each other, looked toward the back of the plane where Jennifer Matthews had gone. And then, from the back of the cabin came a sound, a door, a movement, a specific series of footsteps that the entire cabin tracked with their attention, even though no one could see it directly. And David Park walked back up the aisle alone. Jennifer Matthews did not come with him. She did not walk past row 14 again. She did not collect her things in front of everyone. She was escorted through the back in the quiet procedural way. That means the decision has already been made, and the only thing left is the mechanics of it. The cabin didn't erupt. There was no dramatic moment. There was just her absence settling over the rows like a fact. Marcus looked up at his grandmother. "Grandma," he said, "is she gone?" Thelma looked toward the front of the plane, where Captain Torres was speaking quietly into the intercom handset, and then she looked at her grandson. "Yes, baby," she said. "She's gone." Marcus thought about this. Then he nodded once firmly, the way a 9-year-old nods when he has decided something is resolved. But Thelma Harris knew better. She looked at the broken necklace in her hand. She thought about her mother wearing it. She thought about Angela on a phone right now talking to an attorney. She thought about Derek Hall, journalist, no longer on vacation. She thought about the recording on her phone, still running, still collecting everything. She closed her fingers around the necklace. This was not over. Not even close to over. The plane hadn't moved yet. The gate was still there. And whatever was waiting on the other side of this flight, the calls, the statements, the things that were going to be said on phones and in offices, and eventually in places considerably more formal than any of that, all of it was still ahead. She was ready. She had been ready for 72 years. The plane returned to the gate at 8:59 a.m., not with any announcement that explained what had happened. Captain Torres came on the intercom and said only that there was a crew adjustment that needed to be handled on the ground before departure, and that he apologized for the delay, and that the airline appreciated everyone's patience. It was the kind of language that said everything by saying nothing, and every single person in that cabin knew exactly what it meant. Thelma sat with the broken necklace still in her hand. She had not put it away, and she had not tried to refin it. She just held it. Marcus had fallen asleep against her arm with the sudden complete unconsciousness that children are capable of even in the middle of a crisis. And Destiny sat on her other side, reading nothing, staring at the seat back in front of her with the expression of a child processing something she doesn't yet have words for. The jetway connected with a soft, mechanical thud. And then the door at the front of the cabin opened and 3 people came on board who had not been there before. 2 of them were in Delta uniforms. The third was in a suit. He was a black man, maybe 45, with a badge clipped to his jacket that Thelma couldn't read from row 14, but that clearly carried some kind of authority because every crew member in the front of the cabin straightened slightly when he walked in. His name, as Thelma would learn in about 4 minutes, was Marcus Webb. He was Delta's Senior Director of Customer Experience for the Southeast region, and he had been in the Delta Sky Club at Heartsgate when David Park's call came through, which meant that whatever happened next was not going to be filtered through 3 layers of customer service hold music. He walked directly to row 14 without stopping. "Mrs. Harris," he said. He did not say ma'am. He said her name, which told her that he had been briefed and had actually listened to the briefing. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm with Delta's regional leadership team. I want to start by saying—" "Before you say anything," Thelma said, I want you to know that this entire interaction is being recorded, and I have an attorney who is currently available by phone if I need her." Marcus Webb nodded once. He didn't flinch, didn't recalibrate, didn't look around at the other passengers. He looked directly at her. "That's completely appropriate," he said. "I would expect nothing less." Gerald, 2 rows back, made a sound, something between approval and surprise. "I have been briefed on the incident," Marcus Webb continued. "I have watched video footage recorded by other passengers that was sent to our corporate account approximately 14 minutes ago. I have spoken with Captain Torres, and I want to be direct with you about what I know." He paused. "What happened to you on this aircraft was wrong. It was a violation of your rights as a passenger. It was a violation of Delta's policies. And based on what I've seen, it may constitute a violation of federal law. Jennifer Matthews has been removed from this flight and has been placed on administrative suspension pending a full investigation." The cabin, which had been doing a collective impression of people who were not listening, stopped pretending. The man who had said for a necklace earlier put down his newspaper entirely. "Administrative suspension," Thelma said, "not termination. That determination will be made at the conclusion of the investigation, which will be thorough, and which will Mr. Webb," her voice was quiet and precise. "That woman reached into my personal space and physically removed a piece of my late mother's jewelry from around my neck after I clearly refused to give it to her. The chain is broken." She opened her hand and showed him. "I would like you to explain to me what investigation is needed to determine whether that behavior meets the standard for termination." The cabin was so quiet that the sound of the jetway adjusting was audible. Marcus Webb looked at the broken necklace in her palm. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked up. "You're right," he said. "You are completely right." Destiny turned her head slowly and looked at the Delta executive with the careful attention of someone recalibrating their understanding of how adults operate. "I cannot make a termination announcement to you at this moment," Marcus Webb continued, "because that is a human resources process with specific legal requirements. What I can tell you is that I am personally going to ensure that this investigation does not take weeks or months. You will hear from us within 48 hours. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a business card on the tray table. "That is my direct line, not a call center, my phone. You or your attorney can reach me on that number at any time." Thelma looked at the card. She didn't pick it up yet. "And what about this flight?" "This flight will depart as soon as we complete a crew adjustment. You will be upgraded to first class, you and both of your grandchildren, for the remainder of the journey. All travel expenses for today will be refunded in full, and Delta will cover the repair of the necklace through whatever jeweler you choose." "The necklace is not the point," Thelma said. "No, Marcus Webb said it is not, but it is the least we can do right now, and I want to do it." He looked at her steadily. "Mrs. Harris, I am not here to manage this situation. I'm here because what happened here today is not who we are or who we are supposed to be, and I am genuinely sorry." Thelma studied him. She was very good at reading sincerity. She had been doing it for 7 decades in churches and courtrooms and hospital corridors and corporate offices. She read him for a moment, and then she nodded once. "I'll take the seat upgrade for my grandchildren," she said. "Not for me. I'll stay right here." Marcus Webb blinked. "Ma'am, I said what I said," Thelma told him. Gerald, 2 rows back, laughed. It was a real laugh. Short, warm, the involuntary kind. Destiny looked at her grandmother, and something moved across her face. Something that was not quite a smile, but was in the same family as a smile, and would probably grow into one later. Marcus Webb stood for another moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange for the children to be moved, and for anything you need for the remainder of the flight to be brought to you here." He paused. "Is there anything else you need from me right now?" Thelma picked up his business card. "Not right now," she said, "but there will be." He understood what that meant. He nodded again and walked back toward the front of the cabin, pausing briefly to speak to Captain Torres. And then the door closed, and the jetway disconnected, and the engines, which had gone quiet, slowly began their low rumble back to life. Marcus woke up at the sound of the engines and looked around blurrily. "Are we leaving?" he asked. "Yes, baby," Thelma said. "We're leaving. Is the mean lady still here?" "No." He blinked, thought about. This closed his eyes again. It was 9:14 a.m. Destiny did not go to first class right away. She stayed in her seat until the plane was airborne, until the city fell away beneath them, and the sky was just sky in every direction. Then she looked at her grandmother and said quietly, "Did we win?" Thelma thought about the broken chain in her hand. She thought about Dorothy Harris, who had grown up in Birmingham in conditions that made a broken necklace on an airplane look like the most minor imaginable inconvenience, and who had nevertheless worn that necklace every single day of her adult life, as a quiet, persistent declaration that she was still here, still herself, still unbowed. She thought about what winning meant, and what it cost, and what it left behind when you got it. "We're not finished yet," she said. Same thing she'd said to Marcus before. But this time, she said it differently. Not as a warning, but as a fact. The calm, level kind of fact that you don't argue with. Destiny nodded like she understood that completely, which she did. Then she picked up her carry-on bag and moved to first class without any drama about it. Thelma's phone rang at 9:22. Not Angela this time, an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. She answered, "Mrs. Harris, a man's voice professional, and quick. My name is Robert Chin. I'm a senior producer at the Today Show. We received footage of an incident on a Delta flight this morning involving you and a flight attendant. We'd like to speak with you about." Thelma pulled the phone from her ear and looked at the number. Then she put it back. "How did you get this number?" A brief pause. "It was provided by a passenger on the flight who wanted to ensure your story was heard. Derek Hall, the journalist." Thelma thought for exactly 3 seconds. "I don't have a comment at this time," she said. "You're welcome to contact my daughter Angela Harris, who will be handling media inquiries." She paused. "If she decides to handle media inquiries, of course. Do you have a—" She hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. Different number. CNN. She turned the phone face down on the tray table and looked at the seat back in front of her and breathed from the bottom the way Dorothy had taught her. By 9:40 a.m., she had received calls from 3 news outlets, a text from her brother Raymond that said only, "I just saw the video. What do I do?" And a voicemail from Angela that said the attorney was already drafting a formal notice of intent. She had answered none of the news calls and had texted Raymond back 2 words. Nothing yet. Gerald leaned forward from 2 rows back and tapped her shoulder gently. "You doing okay up there?" She turned. "I've been better." "For what it's worth," he said. "I've been on about 400 flights in my life. I've never said a word to another passenger. I want you to know I don't regret saying something today." "What do you do?" she asked. "I'm a retired circuit court judge," he said. "Atlanta 31 years. Thelma looked at him. He looked back at her with the particular calm of a man who has spent 3 decades watching people decide how to behave when they think no one who matters is watching. I saw everything he said simply. All of it. From the first approach, Thelma Harris looked at Gerald, this large, quiet, steady man, and felt something move through her that she hadn't let herself feel since the moment the necklace came off. Not quite gratitude, something larger, the specific particular thing you feel when the world surprises you by being better than you expected it to be. "Thank you, Gerald," she said. He nodded and sat back. And then, 11 minutes later, the first twist came. The one that changed the shape of everything. It came through Angela, who called at 9:51 with a voice that was doing its absolute best to remain in attorney mode and not quite succeeding. "Mom, are you alone?" "Can you talk?" "I'm in my seat. Gerald is 2 rows back." "Who's Gerald?" "He's a retired circuit court judge who witnessed everything. He's been sitting 2 rows behind me since Atlanta." A pause. "Of course he has." A breath. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "Derek Hall, the journalist on the plane." "I know who he is. He filed a story 20 minutes ago. It's already running." A pause. Mom, the video has been seen 400,000 times. Thelma sat very still. It's not just the video of Jennifer grabbing the necklace, Angela continued. Derek had audio from before that. The whole conversation. He had it all, Mom. From the first time she came to the row. Her voice was controlled, but something was vibrating inside it. People are calling for Delta to fire her. Not just online. Actual public figures. A senator from Georgia just issued a statement. The NAACP has already released a response. A beat. Mom, your name is everywhere right now. DeMailma looked at the seat back in front of her. She thought about Dorothy Harris, about a woman who had worn the same gold necklace every day for 50 years. Not because anyone was watching, but because she knew who she was, and she did not need permission to be it. What does our attorney say? Thelma asked. He says, we have a strong civil rights claim. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, possibly battery physical contact, without consent, in a state of aggression. He wants to move quickly. Angela's voice steadied. But Mom, it's what I found out about Jennifer Matthews that I really need to tell you. Thelma waited. She's been reported before, Angela said. This is not the first time. The air in the cabin did not change. The engines kept making the same sound. But something shifted in Thelma's chest. That cold, clarifying shift that happens when a thing you suspected, but didn't want to be certain of, becomes certain. How many times? 3 formal complaints in the last 4 years. 2 of them were from black passengers. 1 was from a Latino family traveling with elderly relatives. All 3 were, and Mom, this is the word, Delta's own internal documentation, used resolved internally. Angela's voice tightened on those 2 words, the way you tighten a wire. Resolved internally, meaning buried meaning. Someone saw those complaints and cleared her to keep working. Thelma closed her eyes, which means, Angela continued, that this is not just about Jennifer Matthews anymore. This is about what Delta knew, and when they knew it, and what they chose to do with that knowledge. The plane was at 37,000 feet. Below it, the eastern seaboard was going about its morning, and on a tray table in row 14, a retired judge's business card, a Delta executive's business card, and a broken gold necklace were sitting together in the small specific space of one woman's very clear understanding of what she was going to do next. Angela Thelma said, Yeah, Mom. How is Uncle Raymond? A short, involuntary laugh, the exact same laugh as always, the one that sounded just like Dorothy's. He's furious and he's making calls, and he will not listen to a word I say. Good, Thelma said. Let him. Mom. Angela, listen to me. She paused, made sure she had her daughter's full attention. We are not just going to win this for us. Do you understand what I'm saying? A long beat. Then Angela quietly, I understand exactly what you're saying. Those 2 families, the ones who filed complaints and were told it was resolved, I want to find them. Mom, I want to find them, because if they were willing to file a complaint once and got nowhere, they might be willing to speak now that there's a camera, and an attorney, and a retired circuit court judge, and apparently a senator from Georgia involved. Angela was quiet for a moment. You are terrifying, she said, and her voice was full of a love so complete it barely needed the word attached to it. I learned from your grandmother, Thelma said. She put the phone down. She picked up Gerald's card and Marcus Webb's card, and she laid them side by side on the tray table, and she looked at them. Then she picked up the broken necklace again. She thought about the 3 complaints. 3 families, 3 sets of people who had tried to say something and had been shown that what they said didn't matter. She thought about Jennifer Matthews being cleared back to full duty 3 times to go stand in another aisle on another flight and decide which passengers needed to be reminded of who had authority. The anger that moved through her was not hot. It had moved past hot some time ago and settled into something colder and cleaner and more durable than heat. The kind of anger that doesn't yell, the kind that writes things down, the kind that makes calls and keeps records and does not forget. At 10:15 a.m., with 50 minutes still left in the flight, David Park came back down the aisle. He stopped at row 14 and crouched down slightly, speaking in a low voice. Mrs. Harris, I want to say personally that I'm sorry for the way this went, for not moving faster when I should have." Thelma looked at him. He was in his late 30s, Korean American, with the look of someone who had been running things through his head for the last hour and was not happy with what he found. "Why didn't you?" she asked. Not with anger, with genuine inquiry. He exhaled. "Because she's been here longer than me. And because I told myself it was a policy issue, and she knew the policies better than I did." A pause. "I knew that wasn't true. I think I knew that when she came back the second time. I should have stopped it then." Thelma let that sit for a moment. "Will you say that she asked in writing if you're asked to?" He looked at her steadily. "Yes," he said. "I will." She nodded once. He stood and walked away, and Thelma turned and looked out across Destiny's empty seat to the window. Clouds blew the ordinary spectacular indifference of the sky at altitude. She thought about the night her mother died. She thought about sitting in that hospital room, in the blue, pre-dawn silence, and taking that necklace off Dorothy's neck for the last time, and the way the clasp had opened so easily under her fingers, the way the chain had coiled into her palm like something alive that was becoming something still. She thought about putting it on the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning since. She thought about Jennifer Matthews's hand on it, the chain snapping. She thought about Mr. Pearson's son in Harlem with his father's hands. She thought about 3 other families who had tried to say something and been told their something didn't count. She thought about Destiny in first class, probably reading her book now, but carrying something in her that wasn't in there this morning. The knowledge of what her grandmother did and didn't do, and why. The specific transmitted knowledge that passes between women across generations, not through conversation, but through witnessing. She thought about Marcus asleep against her arm for 40 minutes, and the fact that when he woke up, he had asked immediately whether the mean lady was still there, and when told she wasn't, he had closed his eyes again with the matter-of-fact calm of someone who had decided that the adults had handled it, and he could rest. She hoped he would always have that particular ability to rest when the adults handled it. She hoped the world would not spend his life teaching him that he couldn't afford it. At 10:41 a.m., the pilot announced their initial descent into JFK. Thelma Harris picked up her phone and sent one text to Angela. 5 words, "Find the other 2 families." The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Already on it," Angela wrote back. The plane began to descend. New York came up slow beneath them, gray and enormous and indifferent and full of everything. And Thelma Harris sat in row 14 with a broken necklace in one hand and a retired judge's business card in the other. And she was not finished, not even close. They landed at 11:03 a.m. The wheels hit the runway with that familiar shudder, and the cabin shifted forward, and Marcus woke up immediately, the way he always did, fully like a switch, and looked at his grandmother with clear eyes. "Are we home?" "Almost," Thelma said. "Almost, baby." The plane taxied for 7 minutes, and she used every one of them. She had 3 voicemails she hadn't listened to, yet 11 text messages, and 2 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize that had left no messages at all. Angela had texted twice more since the descent began. The first said the attorney had already made contact with Delta's legal department. The second said simply, "Mom, turn on the news when you land." Thelma looked at that text for a long moment. Then the plane stopped, and the seatbelt sign went off, and the cabin erupted into the usual choreography of people standing too fast and opening overhead bins and checking their phones all at once. Gerald stood up behind her and touched her shoulder lightly as people began to move. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I want to give you something before we get off." She turned. He was holding a folded piece of paper. His own notepad paper, she realized from a small leather notepad she hadn't noticed him carrying. He had written on it in a precise, clear hand. She took it and unfolded it. It was a statement, 4 paragraphs, what he had witnessed in order, with times noted signed at the bottom. The Honorable Gerald A. Washington Circuit Court Judge, Fulton County, Georgia, retired. She read it, once looked up at him. "I've already sent a copy to the FAA's Passenger Rights Division," he said, "from my phone during the flight. It went out at 9:58 a.m. Thelma held the paper. "My daughter is an attorney," she said. "I know," he said. "I heard," a brief smile. "She sounds like she knows what she's doing." "She does," Thelma said. "She gets it from her grandmother." She folded the statement and put it in her purse with Marcus Webb's card and Robert Chin's missed call, and all the other pieces of this morning that were accumulating into something she hadn't fully named yet, but could feel the shape of. Carol Simmons was waiting in the aisle when Thelma stepped out of row 14. She handed Thelma a folded piece of paper, too. Her name, her phone number, her email, and the name of the school she had taught at for 31 years. As if she knew that institutional credibility was going to matter. Savannah, Georgia Carroll said, "Like I told you." "I remember," Thelma said. "My late husband was a civil rights attorney," Carol said. "He worked cases in the 80s. I know what this kind of thing costs the people who pursue it. And I want you to know that what I saw today is worth pursuing." Thelma looked at this woman. Silver hair, reading glasses, small gold earrings, probably 70, maybe older. She had sat in that seat this morning and heard everything and said exactly the right things at exactly the right moments and had asked for nothing in return. "Thank you," Thelma said, and meant it in a way the word couldn't fully carry. Durkle was already in the jetway on his phone when they came through. He looked up when he saw Thelma and lowered the phone. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I owe you a disclosure. I filed a story while we were in the air. It's already running. I should have asked first." Thelma looked at him. "Yes," she said. "You should have." He absorbed that. "I'm sorry. The story needed to be out before anyone could shape the narrative around it. I understand the logic," she said. "I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying you should have asked." He nodded. "Fair." A pause. "My editor wants an interview. A real one, on record. Not a quote. A full story. Your side, your words." "Talk to my daughter," Thelma said, and kept walking. She came through the gate into the terminal at 11:19 a.m., and Angela was there, not on the phone, not on her laptop, just there standing 20 feet from the gate, with both arms already open. And when Thelma saw her, she felt something that had been held very tightly inside her chest since 8:47 that morning begin very slowly to release. Angela Harris was 48 years old, tall and sharp-featured, and dressed in the kind of put-together way that meant she had left a meeting or a call to be here. But she had left it without hesitation. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's jaw, and she was crying before Thelma had taken 3 steps toward her, which was notable, because Angela Harris did not cry easily and did not do it in public under any circumstances that could be avoided. They held each other without speaking for a moment. Marcus immediately threw himself at his aunt's legs. Auntie Angela, a lady, broke Grandma's necklace. Angela held her mother with one arm and pulled Marcus in with the other. "I know, baby, I know." Destiny came through behind them, carrying her own bag and Marcus's, and Angela reached out and got her too. And for a moment, all 4 of them were tangled together in the middle of the JFK arrival hall, while people flowed around them with their rolling bags and their phone screens and their Tuesday urgencies, paying no particular attention to this knot of family that had just come through something. Then Angela pulled back and looked at her mother's face. "Are you hurt?" she asked. The attorney voice was gone. This was just Angela. "No, Thelma," said the necklace. Thelma opened her purse and showed her the broken chain. Angela's jaw tightened. She looked at it for a long moment, and then she looked at her mother, and something passed between them that was too old and too deep to be put in any language currently in use. The kind of communication that happens between a woman and her daughter when both of them have loved the same person their whole lives, and that person is gone now, and the only things left of her are exactly the things that need protecting. Marcus Webb called me at 11:07. Angela said, shifting back. "Delta has placed Jennifer Matthews on unpaid suspension, not paid. Their legal department has already reached out to our attorney. I think they know what they're sitting on." "They should," Thelma said. "Because I do. The other 2 families," Angela started. "You found them." "1. Angela's eyes sharpened with the specific focus of someone who has been working a problem for 2 hours and is close. Her name is Denise Carter. She flew Delta out of Charlotte in 2022. She filed a formal complaint about Jennifer Matthews. The exact same pattern. Mom jewelry? A different reason each time. Denise is a nurse. She was flying home from a medical conference. Jennifer told her her stethoscope chain was a safety hazard and demanded she remove it. Angela paused. Delta's response was a 3-line form letter and a $50 flight credit. Velma stopped walking, just for a moment, just to let that sit. $50, she said. $50, Angela confirmed. Has anyone spoken to her? Our attorney made contact 45 minutes ago. She's been watching the news. She already said yes. 11:28 a.m. They were moving through the terminal toward the exit. Angela's hand on her mother's arm. The children just ahead. Thelma's phone rang again. Another number she didn't know. Different area code. She answered it this time. Mrs. Harris. This is Patricia Moore. I'm the director of the APAWS. A brief rustle of papers. Eastern Region Legislative Affairs Office for the NAACP. We've been in contact with your daughter this morning, and I want you to know that our national legal team is available to you immediately at no cost if you choose to pursue this. Velma had been a member of the NAACP for 51 years. She had paid her dues every year since 1974, in good times and tight times, both because her mother had told her that you pay your dues not for what it gives you, but for what it means you're part of. She had never once expected to receive this particular call. I appreciate that deeply. She said, please speak with my daughter. She handed the phone to Angela, who took it with one hand while pulling up something on her own phone, with the other moving with the efficient, multi-tracked intensity of a woman who has shifted from personal to professional without losing either. They reached the exit at 11:34, and that is when the cameras were there. Not the overwhelming bank of equipment you see at press conferences. Just 3 news crews, local affiliates set up with the specific preparedness of people who had been tipped off that this was the right exit at the right time. Derek Hall, she realized, or possibly Raymond, who was standing 30 feet away, looking exactly as described, which was to say furious and making calls, and who looked up when he saw Thelma and said her name across the distance in a voice that carried considerably more grief than fury when he actually saw her face. Thelma looked at the cameras. She thought about what Angela had said on the plane. Your name is everywhere. She thought about not wanting that, about the deep, genuine preference of a private woman who had spent 72 years solving her problems without an audience. She thought about Denise Carter and her $50 flight credit. She thought about the third family still unfound. She walked directly toward the cameras. Angela caught up beside her in 2 steps. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do, Thelma said. She stopped in front of the first reporter, a young woman with a microphone who looked about 25 and who had the nervous, urgent energy of someone covering her first genuinely significant story. Mrs. Harris, the reporter said, can you tell us what happened on the plane this morning? Thelma looked at the camera. She thought about how to begin. She thought about Dorothy Harris, who had once told her that the most dangerous thing a black woman could do in America was be ordinary in public. Not angry, not threatening, just ordinary, and present and unbowed. Because ordinariness in a black woman was somehow still in this country a provocation to certain kinds of people. I was sitting with my grandchildren, Thelma said, her voice absolutely clear, wearing my late mother's necklace. She passed 4 months ago. A flight attendant demanded I remove it. I declined. She took it off me by force. She held up the broken chain so the camera could see it. The reporter stared at the chain for a moment. Then, what would you like to see happen as a result of today? I would like Jennifer Matthews to be terminated, Thelma said. I would like Delta Airlines to conduct a genuine, transparent investigation into how many other passengers she treated this way and how many complaints were filed and buried. I would like Denise Carter, a nurse from Charlotte who filed a complaint against this same flight attendant in 2022 and received a $50 voucher to receive the same attention her complaint deserved 2 years ago. She paused. And I would like my grandchildren, who watched all of this morning, to understand that you do not have to accept being treated this way, that your history, your family, your mother's jewelry, none of it is subject to someone else's authority to remove. She was aware of Destiny standing just behind her left shoulder. She could feel her granddaughter listening to every word. The second camera had come in closer. The reporter from the second outlet was already talking in a low voice to Angela. Raymond had appeared at Thelma's side, and she could feel the energy coming off him. That specific Raymond energy that was equal parts indignation and love and helplessness in the face of both. And she reached over and took his hand without looking at him, and he went quiet immediately and held on. There is a third family, Thelma continued, another passenger, who filed a complaint against this flight attendant that we have not yet identified. If you are that person and you are watching this, please reach out to my daughter. We are standing together on this. You are not alone. She was done talking to the cameras. She turned away before anyone could ask another question, and Angela stepped in behind her to handle whatever came next, and Raymond was immediately on his phone again. And Thelma walked through the glass doors and into the New York air and stopped. Destiny appeared beside her. She had both bags again, and she stood next to her grandmother and looked out at the street and was quiet for a long moment. "Grandma," she said, "who is Denise Carter?" "A woman who tried to do what's right and got ignored." Thelma said, "Until today." Destiny processed this. "Is that what you meant on the plane about not being finished just for us?" Thelma looked at her granddaughter, 11 years old, the kind of 11 that has seen things and heard things, and is assembling them into an understanding of the world that is going to shape who she becomes. "That's exactly what I meant," Thelma said. It was 11:49 a.m. Angela came through the doors at 11:53, phone in hand, and the expression on her face stopped Thelma cold. Not good news, not bad news exactly. Something that was both layered on top of each other in the specific way that things are when a situation has developed faster and larger than even your best preparation accounted for. "Mom," she said, "I just got off the phone with Marcus Webb." Thelma waited. They found the third family. Thelma held completely still. "Delta found them first," Angela said, "before we did. A family from Memphis, 2023. Mother and 2 daughters. Jennifer Matthews told the mother her daughter's earrings were a distraction to other passengers. A beat. The mother is a retired school teacher. Her name is Ruth Ann Bridges. She filed a complaint, and Delta sent her a form letter." Angela looked at her mother. She saw the news this morning. She called Delta directly at 9:15 a.m. She had kept the form letter. She had kept every email. She has names and dates and seat numbers. The air moved through Thelma in a way she felt physically. Not quite a shiver, not quite a breath, but the specific interior movement of a thing clicking into place. 3 families, all women, all black, all told to remove something from their bodies. All told afterward that it had been handled. One of them at least who had kept every piece of paper. Ruth Ann Bridges kept her records. Thelma said, for 2 years. Angela confirmed. She told the Delta representative this morning that she kept them because she knew one day it would matter. She just didn't know when. Raymond, who had been listening, stopped pacing. He looked at his sister. His face did something complicated, and then he sat down on a bench and pressed both hands over his mouth for a moment. "Mama would have," he started, and didn't finish. "I know," Thelma said. "She would have gone down there herself, personally." "I know, Raymond." He exhaled, nodded, stood back up, picked up his phone again. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. His voice had changed. The frantic energy had settled into something quieter and more useful. "Right now," Thelma looked at him. "I need you to take these children somewhere and get them lunch. They've been on their feet since 6 o'clock this morning, and they're hungry, and they've seen enough today." Raymond looked at Marcus, who was leaning against the wall with the expression of someone who would very much like a cheeseburger. "I can do that," Raymond said. "Angela and I will meet you in 2 hours." Raymond put his hand on the back of Thelma's head, the way he had done since they were children. Not a pat, something more deliberate than that. The specific touch of a brother making sure his sister is still there. "You good?" he asked quietly. "Getting there," she said. He nodded. "Called the kids, they left." Angela waited until they were gone, then turned to her mother. "2 hours," she said. "We have a call at 1:15 with our attorney, the NAACP legal team, and a representative from Ruth Ann Bridges' side because Ruth Ann already has an attorney too." Thelma looked at her. "She got one in 2023, Angela said, right after Delta sent her the form letter. She just never had enough to move forward with until now." And there it was, the moment that arrives in every situation like this one, when what looked like one woman's personal fight on one Tuesday morning reveals itself to be something that was already years in the making, already building, already waiting for the right moment to have enough weight behind it to move. Thelma thought about sitting on that plane this morning, helping Marcus with his seatbelt, about destiny, arguing for the window seat, about the necklace against her chest, and the routine of putting it on that morning, and the specific ordinary way the day had started. She had not been looking for this. She had not wanted this. She had simply been on her way home. She reached into her purse and found the broken necklace. She laid it across her palm one more time and looked at it. The chain was clean and gold, and the damage was precise. Just the clasp broken where it had been pulled. Everything else intact, the cross still there, the diamond chip still catching light. She closed her fingers around it. "Let's go," she said. Angela flagged a car. They got in. The city moved past the windows. The enormous, indifferent, complicated city that had been Thelma's home for 46 years. And Thelma held the necklace in her closed hand, the whole way the same way she had held it since the moment it was taken from her, and the moment she took it back. At 12:41 p.m., Angela's phone buzzed with a news alert. She looked at it. Then she turned the screen so her mother could read it. Delta Airlines issues public statement regarding Flight 2287 incident. Airline confirms flight attendant Jennifer Matthews has been terminated effective immediately pending full internal investigation. CEO personal apology forthcoming. Thelma read it twice. She did not cheer. She did not exhale dramatically. She thought about Denise Carter's $50 voucher. She thought about Ruth Ann Bridges keeping her paperwork for 2 years by herself waiting. She thought about the form letters and the cleared complaints, and the next flight, and the next family, and the specific institutional machinery that had protected Jennifer Matthews 3 times and sent her back out into a cabin to do it again. Terminated pending investigation was not the end. It was not even close to the end. But it was the beginning of something real. And Thelma Harris had spent enough of her 72 years knowing the difference between those two things to appreciate this moment for exactly what it was. Not a victory, but a door opening. And on the other side of it, 3 families and 1 attorney, and 1 retired circuit court judge, and 1 civics teacher from Savannah, and 1 journalist who was no longer on vacation, all of them walking through it together. She put the phone down. Outside the window, New York was doing what it always did, which was everything at once loudly, without waiting for anyone to be ready. Thelma Harris had been ready for 72 years. The car pulled up to Angela's building at 12:58 p.m. They had 13 minutes before the call. Angela was already on her phone in the elevator, confirming the conference line number with their attorney, whose name was James Okafor, and who had been practicing civil rights law in New York for 22 years. And who had, according to Angela, taken 1 look at the recording and said 4 words, "This is very clean." In attorney language, that meant the kind of evidence that doesn't require interpretation. The kind that speaks for itself in any room you carry it into. Velma stood in the elevator with her purse in her hand and her mother's broken necklace still in her pocket and said nothing. She was conserving something. Not energy exactly, more like intention. The specific gathering of a person who knows that what comes next is going to require all of her, and who is making sure all of her is present and available. The elevator opened. They went in. Angela's apartment was the organized, purposeful kind bookshelves that were actually used, a desk that had seen serious work done on it, and a kitchen table that had served as a war room on more than one occasion. She had it set up in under 3 minutes. Laptop, open notepad, 2 pens, a glass of water for her mother that she sat down without asking. Thelma sat, drank, looked at the notepad. "Tell me about James Okafor," she said. Angela pulled up a chair. 22 years in civil rights litigation. He's won 4 cases against major carriers, 2 of them airline-related discrimination. He's been on the phone with the NAACP legal team since 10 this morning. A beat. He already has a copy of Gerald Washington's statement. Gerald emailed it directly to his office at 9:58. Remember, James called Gerald personally at 11:15. They talked for 40 minutes. Gerald didn't tell me that. Thelma said, "Gerald strikes me as someone who handles things, and then doesn't announce that he handled them," Angela said. Thelma thought about a retired circuit court judge from Atlanta, sitting in his seat 2 rows back, filling out his notepad in careful handwriting, while the engines hummed, sending it to the FAA and a civil rights attorney before the wheels touched the ground, asking for nothing, expecting no recognition. She made a mental note to call him. The conference line opened at 1:15 exactly. James Okafor's voice was calm and deliberate, the kind that takes up space in a room without needing to be loud. He had a New York accent underneath a lifetime of professional neutrality, and he spoke to Thelma directly, not to Angela, which she noted. "Mrs. Harris, I want to begin by saying, I've listened to the full recording twice. I've watched both videos, yours and Dirk Hall's. I've read Judge Washington's statement. I've reviewed the formal incident report filed by Captain Torres, which Delta's legal department transmitted to us at 12:03. A brief pause. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented passenger civil rights violations I have seen in over 2 decades of practice." Belma said, "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means that what Jennifer Matthews did constitutes at minimum battery under New York state law. Physical contact that was harmful and offensive, and made without consent. It also establishes a strong foundation for a federal civil rights claim under Section 1981, which covers racial discrimination in the making and enforcement of contracts, including airline passenger contracts." Another pause. "It means that Delta's pattern of receiving and dismissing complaints about this specific employee creates what we call institutional liability. They cannot claim they didn't know. They knew. They chose inaction 3 times. The NAACP representative on the line, Patricia Moore, whom Thelma had spoken to briefly at the airport, spoke next. "Mrs. Harris, I want to add that we have already identified media contacts at the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and 3 network affiliates who are following this story as of this morning. This is no longer a local incident. This is national." Thelma was quiet for a moment. "How is Denise Carter?" A slight pause. James said, "She's been in contact with our office since 11:40. She's steady. She's angry, appropriately so, and she wants to move forward." And Ruth Ann Bridges. Ruth Ann's attorney, a woman named Sylvia Grant, who had a Memphis number and a voice like someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment, said, "Ruth Ann is ready. She has been ready since Delta sent her that letter in 2023. She said this morning that she didn't keep those papers because she was certain something would happen. She kept them because she refused to pretend it hadn't." Thelma closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. She thought about 3 women. Herself, 72, sitting in row 14 with her grandchildren. Denise Carter, a nurse flying home from a conference, told her stethoscope chain was a hazard. Ruth Ann Bridges, a retired school teacher, watching her daughters, told their earrings were a distraction. 3 different flights, 3 different years, 3 different reasons that all had the same shape underneath. "What do we do next?" Thelma asked. "We file." James said simply, "We file a joint civil complaint on behalf of all 3 of you. We file it as a pattern of discriminatory conduct, not 3 separate incidents. Delta's internal records, which their legal team was required to produce this morning under our preservation letter, show that Jennifer Matthews received formal complaints from a total of 7 passengers over 4 years. 7, Mrs. Harris, not 3. 4 of those complaints were from Black or Latino passengers. 3 were closed without investigation. The line was silent. Angela wrote something on the notepad and turned it toward her mother. It said 7. Thelma looked at the number. She had thought 3. 3 families had been a weight she felt in her chest. 7 was a different kind of weight entirely. 7 was not a pattern that could be explained away. 7 was a policy. 7 was a decision made repeatedly by people who had the power to stop it and chose not to. When Thelma said, "We can file by end of business Friday," James said, "But I want to be honest with you about what that means. It will be public. It will be loud. Delta's legal team is already working to manage the narrative. Filing this week keeps the pressure exactly where it needs to be, but it also means your name and Denise's name and Ruth Ann's name are going to be in every major newspaper in the country within 24 hours of filing. They're already there." Thelma said. "Yes," James agreed. "They are then Friday," she said. Angela nodded once. The call ended at 1:51 p.m. Angela closed the laptop. She looked at her mother. For a moment, neither of them said anything, and the apartment was quiet with a particular quiet of after the specific silence that falls when a long, impossible, exhausting morning has finally shifted into something that has direction and weight and forward motion. "You okay?" Angela asked. 7 families, Thelma said. 7 complaints. 3 families confirmed so far. The other 4 find them, Thelma said. If they're willing. No pressure on anyone who's not ready, but give them the option. She paused. Nobody should have to do this alone. Angela looked at her mother for a long moment. "You know this is going to take a while," she said. "Ms. maybe longer. I know it's going to be uncomfortable. They're going to look into everything about you. Your finances, your history. You're Angela." Thelma looked at her daughter. "I am 72 years old. I grew up in Birmingham. I have been audited, followed, questioned, and dismissed more times than I can count. A team of corporate attorneys going through my credit history is not going to be the hardest thing I have faced. A beat, not even close." Angela's eyes went bright for a moment. She pressed them, steady, nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom." They met Raymond and the children at a diner on Amsterdam Avenue at 2:30. Marcus had syrup on his shirt and the satisfied look of someone who had fully transitioned from the morning's drama into a plate of pancakes, which was Thelma thought exactly the right response to the day. Destiny was sitting across from her uncle, and when Thelma came in, Destiny looked at her with a very specific question in her eyes. Thelma sat down, looked at her granddaughter. "We're filing a lawsuit," she said simply. "On Friday, 3 families together. Destiny absorbed this. Will you win? We will do everything we can." Thelma said, "That's not the same as winning, but it's the part we control. And the other part, is up to judges and juries and how hard James Okafor works." A pause. "He seems like he works very hard." Destiny looked down at the table, then back up. "Grandma," she said, "can I come when you file? I want to be there." Thelma looked at her 11 years old, wearing her mother's gold bracelet, sitting in a diner in New York on the most complicated Tuesday of her young life, asking to be present for the next part. "Yes," Thelma said, "you can come." Raymond, who had been listening, reached across the table and covered his sister's hand with his. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The call came at 4:17 p.m. Not from Angela, not from James Okafor, not from a news network, or the NAACP, or a senator's office. It came from an Atlanta number that Thelma didn't recognize. And when she answered it, the voice on the other end was a woman's older, a little tired, a little careful. The voice of someone who had been rehearsing what she was going to say and wasn't entirely sure she was ready to say it. "Mrs. Harris," the woman said, "my name is Claudette Morrison. I was on your flight this morning." Thelma sat up straighter. "I was in row 22. Claudette said, I didn't say anything. I want you to know that I'm calling because I've been sitting with that all day. I didn't say anything when it was happening. And I don't feel right about that. The specific texture of what Thelma felt in that moment was complicated. It was not anger, and it was not forgiveness, and it was not absolution, and it was not dismissal. It was something that required all of those things to be present at once, without any of them taking over. "What made you call?" she asked. "My daughter sent me the video. Chloette said she saw it online before I even landed. She called me screaming a pause, and her voice wobbled slightly. And I had to tell her I was on that plane, that I saw it happen, and she asked me what I did. A beat. I didn't have an answer for her. Thelma said nothing. I know I can't take it back," Claudette said. I don't know what to do with this feeling of having been there," and said nothing. Thelma thought about this. She thought about all the rows of passengers this morning, the ones who spoke up, the ones who filmed, the ones who stayed silent. She thought about how easy it was to be angry at the silence, and how complicated the silence actually was, the calculations people make in those moments, the fear, the uncertainty, the telling yourself it will resolve on its own, or that it's not your place, or that you didn't see enough to be sure of what you saw. Claudette said, "Do you have children?" 3. Claudette said, surprised by the question. "And 4 grandchildren." "Then let me ask you something. If it had been you in row 14 this morning, if it had been your grandchildren, would you have wanted someone in row 22 to say something?" A long silence. "Yes," Claudette said quietly. "I would have." "Then you know," Thelma said, "what you're going to do differently next time." Another silence, not the heavy kind. Something lighter and harder to name. "Thank you," Claudette said. "Don't thank me," Thelma said. "Just do it next time." She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. Then she put it down and picked up her glass of water and looked at nothing in particular and thought about how many Claudettes there had been over the years. How many people in row 22, watching, calculating, staying quiet. How many of them had gone home afterward and felt this exact same thing and never made a call. How many next times had come and gone without the lesson carrying forward. She hoped this one would be different. She suspected it would be for Claudette Morrison specifically. Some lessons land, some don't. You can't control which kind you're giving while you're giving it. At 5:43, Angela called from the other room where she had been working. "Mom, you need to see this." Thelma walked in. Angela turned the laptop toward her. Delta's CEO, a man named Thomas Harrington, who had been in the role for 3 years, had recorded a video statement, not a press release, a video. He was sitting at a desk, no tie, looking directly into the camera, and he was not using the careful corporate language of managed crisis communication. He looked like a man who had watched the recording himself and had felt it. What happened to Mrs. Thelma Harris and her grandchildren on Flight 287 this morning is not a policy failure, he said. It is not a training failure. It is a moral failure. And it happened on our watch to a passenger who was traveling with her family, wearing her late mother's necklace, doing nothing wrong. Jennifer Matthews has been terminated. That termination is permanent and is not pending any review. He paused. I also want to say directly, Delta failed Mrs. Harris and her family, not just today, but in 2022 and 2023, when passengers brought complaints to us that we should have taken more seriously and did not. I am ordering an immediate and complete review of every passenger complaint filed against cabin crew in the last 5 years. Every complaint. Every one. He looked into the camera one more time. Mrs. Harris, if you're watching this, I am sorry. And I mean that as a human being, not as a CEO. The video ended. Angela and Thelma sat with it for a moment. He did not have to say 2022 and 2023, Angela said slowly. His legal team almost certainly told him not to. But he did, Thelma said. He did. Angela looked at her mother. James says it actually strengthens our position because it's a public admission of prior knowledge. But she paused. I don't think he said it for legal strategy. I think he said it because it was true, and he knew it was true, and he decided truth mattered more than strategy today. Thelma looked at the frozen image of Thomas Harrington on the laptop screen. Good, she said. Then we'll hold him to it. The twist that arrived at 7:02 p.m. did not come from Delta. It did not come from the NAACP or the press or the senator from Georgia. It came from Derek Hall, who texted Angela a link with 3 words before it: "You need this." Angela opened it, read it. Her face went through 3 separate expressions in about 4 seconds. Shock, then understanding, then a slow, cold fury that settled into something very still. She handed the phone to her mother. It was an article. Derek had been reporting all day, pulling threads. He had found Jennifer Matthews' social media history, not her public accounts, but posts from a private account that had been screenshotted and sent to him by a former colleague of Jennifer's who had watched the news that morning and decided to make a decision. The posts went back 3 years. They were not subtle. They were not ambiguous. They were the specific unguarded language of someone who believed in the privacy of what they thought was an unseen space. Exactly what Thelma Harris had suspected from the first moment Jennifer Matthews stopped at row 14 and looked at her family with that particular expression. The post used language that Thelma had heard before language. Her mother had heard language, her grandmother had heard the language of a specific ancient contempt that changes its vocabulary over decades, but never changes its meaning. She read it, once put the phone down. She was going to do this. Thelma said it was not a question. She came to work that day, already carrying this. Angela said her voice was very controlled. The plane was not random. The jewelry was not random. She looked at you, and she saw what she had always decided she saw, and she acted on it. Thelma sat back. She thought about Marcus with his seatbelt. She thought about Destiny arguing for the window seat. She thought about the specific innocence of that argument. 2 children negotiating a fair arrangement on their way home with their grandmother wearing their family's gold. She looked at my grandchildren, Thelma said. Yes, Angela said quietly. She looked at my grandchildren, and she decided, yes. The room was very quiet. Send it to James, Thelma said. Already done, Angela said while you were reading. At 8:30 p.m., Thelma called Gerald Washington. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Harris, I was hoping you'd call. You sent your statement to James Okafor this morning. She said before we even landed. I did. You didn't tell me. You had enough to carry, he said simply. I handled what I could handle from my seat. She thought about that for a moment. Thank you, Gerald. Don't thank me, he said. This is what it looks like when people do what they're supposed to do. It shouldn't be exceptional. It should be ordinary. A pause. But I'll be there when you need me. In writing, in person, wherever the case goes. It may go to federal court, she said. I know where federal court is, he said dryly. I went there somewhat regularly for 31 years. She almost laughed. It was the first time all day she had come close to laughing, and the fact that it happened in a conversation with a retired circuit court judge she had met 8 hours ago on an airplane felt somehow entirely right. She said goodnight, put the phone down. Marcus came in from Raymond's room, where he had been watching television with his uncle, and climbed onto the couch beside his grandmother and put his head on her shoulder without saying anything. She put her arm around him. After a minute, he said, Grandma is great. Grandma's necklace going to be okay. Yes, baby. I'm taking it to the jeweler tomorrow. The one in Harlem. Mr. Pearson's son. He nodded slowly. Is it going to look the same? Exactly the same. Promise. She thought about the chain, about the clasp, about the specific place where it had broken, and the fact that gold properly repaired leaves no visible mark of what happened to it. She thought about that being either the best or the most complicated metaphor she had encountered in a long time. I promise, she said. He was asleep in 4 minutes. At 9:48 p.m., Thelma sat at Angela's kitchen table alone. The apartment was quiet. Angela was in her room, still working the light under the door, and the occasional low sound of her voice on the phone. Raymond had gone home. The children were asleep. She took the necklace out of her pocket and laid it on the table. She looked at it for a long time. She thought about Dorothy Harris, putting it on the first morning after her own mother gave it to her. She thought about the 50 years it had spent around Dorothy's neck, through everything, through the Birmingham years, and the Montgomery years, and the New York years, and the hospital years, and the last quiet, difficult years, when Dorothy had come to live with Thelma, and Thelma had helped her in and out of chairs, and made sure the necklace was fastened right every morning. She thought about Jennifer Matthews and what she had wanted to accomplish by reaching out and taking it. She thought about whether Jennifer understood even now what she had actually touched when she touched it, whether she had any comprehension of the full weight of what she had put her hand on. She didn't think so. She thought about Claudette Morrison in row 22 calling her daughter, not having an answer. She thought about Derek Hall no longer on vacation. She thought about Carol Simmons' civics teacher, 31 years Savannah, Georgia, not hard to find. She thought about Denise Carter filing a complaint and receiving $50 and keeping her dignity anyway. She thought about Ruth Ann Bridges keeping her papers for 2 years alone in a drawer somewhere in Memphis on the specific faith that one day it would matter. She picked up the necklace. She held it in both hands, the broken clasp between her fingers. She thought about her mother's hands, about what Dorothy Harris had survived and what she had built from the surviving, and what she had passed forward in the form of a small gold cross, and a way of standing in a room, and a way of breathing when something was trying to get under your skin, slow, steady from the bottom. She thought about Destiny saying, "I want to be there when you file." She thought about what Destiny would carry forward from this day, and what Marcus would carry, and what the children of Denise Carter and Ruth Ann Bridges would carry, and what Claudette Morrison's 4 grandchildren would carry from the story their grandmother told them about a Tuesday morning when she was on a plane and she didn't say something and came home and had to sit with that, and then made a call. She thought about all of it, the whole accumulated weight of this one ordinary morning that had become something else entirely. And she felt for the first time since 8:47 a.m. something that was not quite peace, but was peace's neighbor. The specific quiet of a person who has done what they needed to do and knows there is more ahead and is ready for it. She set the necklace back on the table. She was going to take it to Mr. Pearson's son in the morning. He was going to fix the clasp. She was going to put it back on. She was going to wear it to the courthouse on Friday when James Okafor filed the complaint. And she was going to wear it to every deposition and every hearing and every day of whatever came next. The same way Dorothy Harris had worn it every day of her life. Not as a statement, not as a symbol, but simply because it was hers. And it had always been hers, and no one had the right to remove it. Dorothy Harris had lived through things that should have broken her, and had worn that necklace through all of it without asking anyone's permission. Her daughter intended to do the same. Thelma Harris turned off the kitchen light, walked to the window, looked out at the city, and let the day finish around her with the steady, undefeated certainty of a woman who understood in her bones that the most powerful thing she had ever done was simply refuse to take it,